Hey y'all, Uncle Paul here, and it's time to get in the arena with Uncle Paul. Stay tuned.
These words will never let me go. Oh no, these words will never let me go.
The Houston metro area has over 7 million people, and yet only one unfiltered source of news, and that's Grizzy's Hood News. Grizzy Castillo has built a platform of dedicated followers, helping her solve cases, find missing people, and cover stories that the mainstream networks just won't cover. When my nephew went missing, Grizzy was the first and only for the longest time to help us. She's become a pillar in the community, and now she's got a podcast, Hood News Unfiltered with Grizzy, that you can watch Saturday mornings at 9:30 a.m. on Houston CW or anytime at grizzyshoodnews.com. Grizzy works tirelessly to bring us content, sometimes funny, sometimes heartbreaking, and sometimes dangerous, which is why we have to support her sponsors. Go to grizzyshoodnews.com and find out how you can advertise. Follow her on all the major social media platforms, or watch her anytime at grizzyshoodnews.com. If it's real news, it's Hood News. That's grizzyshoodnews.com.
Hey y'all, Uncle Paul here, and this is In the Arena with Uncle Paul. I am excited to bring you, actually, he's returning to the show, David Keck of the Surviving Podcast. He was actually the first guest I had on this show. So we recorded this roughly a month ago, and I'm excited to bring it to you. David has a very heavy and a very dark story, but it's one full of survival and tenacity and strength and courage. I adore David, and I know you're going to adore him just as much as I do.
So, just to check in, you're my first interview in over a year, so I don't even know if I think I'm kind of rusty at this point. So just bear with me here.
Yeah, of course.
Audience, I do have on the line David Keck from the Surviving Podcast. David is a friend. David is an influencer. David has a story. Hi, David.
Hey, buddy.
Good to
Thanks
see
for
you.
having me.
No, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So let's just jump in. Use 5 adjectives to describe yourself today.
Oh gosh. So I we're going back to school in the beginning. So I think I'm charismatic. I'm very passionate. I'm very loyal. What is that? 30. I'm passionate and I bust my damn ass at everything I do. I put 100% in everything that I do. And sometimes that's really good and sometimes it's not.
Have you always been that way?
I would like to think so.
Okay. What was growing up like for you?
I mean, of course, I'm an open gay man in the South, so that comes with a whole thing, right? But I was very lucky with having such an amazing family, and being gay wasn't a thing. Being a little feminine or different than other Southern boys just wasn't a thing for my family. I was very lucky with that.
Wow. What state did you grow up in?
I'm in Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Yeah, so what do you think about Tennessee right now? I'm
You're like the
probably not
unicorn
your
in
favorite
Tennessee.
person.
So I mean, okay, so it was your family conservative or religious, or as a lot of
Um,
Southerners?
so of course we have a Christian background, but it was never, my parents just always wanted me to find, they introduced me to religion, they introduced me to God, but they wanted me to find what religion and God in a relationship with a higher spirit or was for me. They did not want to tell me how to worship or praise. So that was nice. I was given a choice. But I think what played into my factor with having such an open-minded family is my parents had me at 14 years old. And so in the 80s, my mom was kicked out of school. Now they have daycares in school, so I think where there was so much hatred and judgment and cliches and prejudices that came with that, it opened them up to to be open-minded, I guess.
No, I get that. I get that. I mean, when you're facing, or when I'm facing, any kind of hardship or judgment, it tends to make me less judgmental with others and a little more compassionate with others. So I can
Yeah.
definitely understand that. Now, how was that growing up with parents that were so young?
I loved it. And I love it even more now because my parents are 14 years older than me. I mean, they're in their 50s. And so the only thing that I hated about it is my mom has always been just flawlessly beautiful. And so, of course, like the older boys in the neighborhood always wanted to like hit on my mom, and that bothered me. Or if we were at like I remember one time we were at Walmart on a Mother's Day, and there was a new family behind us, and she was holding her brand new baby. My mom was like, "Oh, this is your first Mother's Day," and then they asked if we were going to have a child. And my mom was like, "This is my child," So that was weird. But my parents played the role of parents, but they were able to relate.
Well, I love that for your journey. Are they still together?
No, no, I've never known my mom and dad to be together, but
Oh,
I there was never any hatred toward each other. They're growing up, they lived in the same neighborhood. It was
and
nothing to come home and from school and my mom and my stepmother be having a glass of wine on the couch watching Home Shopping Network. It was never a thing.
I love that. I
Yeah,
really love that. That's not, you have a very rare positive childhood given the circumstances. Um,
yeah.
any childhood trauma at all?
Yeah, it did take my parents a little while to be good parents. Again, it was kids having kids. They had my brother at 16. So my brother and I, we do share the same parents. My mother did leave me and my brother on a doorstep and went back to her mom and dad's for a while. Luckily, it was a family member's doorstep, but then for a while we were kind of just passed around. Um, so there was that trauma. There was my dad's mother played a huge role in raising my brother and I. And on March 28th, which is Reba McEntire's birthday, which if anybody knows anything about me, Reba's my queen.
Come on, Reba.
Um, and but it was my grandmother, my great grandmother, my great aunt, my little brother and we were hit by a drunk driver, and it killed everybody in the car other than my brother and I. And of course the drunk driver lived. He ended up unaliving himself 3 or 4 days later. But all those laws about uh homicide by a drunk driver was passed in Tennessee in my family's name. So there was a lot that came with that. They said that I would never walk, talk, or do anything on my own again if I lived, and I proved them wrong. And now I can't.
As we will prove them wrong later. In your story, it seems like you're someone that proves a lot of people wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that because you inspire me to prove people wrong. I had a plaque. I don't know where it is, but it literally says "prove them wrong." So fitting enough that you bring that up. So does that trauma manifest in your life in any way today, or is that something you've worked through?
So I'm a huge advocate in therapy, and so I've never been a stranger to a therapist, and so of course I'm able to work through things, but I don't think that trauma ever leaves you. I don't think that you're ever healed or recovered from it. I think that you just learn how to maintain the triggers. You have to learn a new part of you. And with that happening to me, I think I was 9 at the time, 9 or 11 at the time. And so I was very young, and so to go through such a tragic loss and to even remember and see the things that I did, that no one, regardless of your age, should see. Of course that still sticks with you, but I again am a huge advocate with therapy, and I work through it. I mean, it's something that I think about on a regular basis. The reason I mentioned Reba and it being her birthday is that's the last memory I had was hearing the radio station wish Reba happy birthday. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's a lot to go through as a kid. That's just a lot to process. And now were your parents just as like pro therapy as you are? Was that something that they'd introduced to you, or just something that was always like intrinsically okay with you?
So they had never been to therapy until this happened. And when my brother and I, when we recovered and got out of the hospital, part of the state's victims advocacy thing is you get to go to therapy. And so it was advised, and my family decided that that was probably the best thing. And so that's what got me into it. And I've just never stopped.
That I love that. I mean, it's rare to hear someone from the South be so pro therapy that early on.
Yeah.
And more so now, because I imagine being exposed to therapy and have it being, a positive experience kind of planted those seeds that would later grow to you being so pro therapy now. And I'm sure that plays into your podcast and your own journey. Because we're going to talk about, the most horrible thing that ever happened to you. I'm hoping that's the most horrible thing that's ever happened to you.
Yeah.
So you grew up in the South. For the most part, you didn't have a ton of bias against you for being gay, at least in your family and friends, it doesn't sound like.
Right.
So David, for the audience, y'all, I know him, y'all don't, or you might not, I should say. You might know him. But David survived something very, very, very horrific. So let's talk about that night. Where were you? Who were you with? What time, year?
Yeah, so it was October of 2014. It was the week of Halloween. And there is a bar that my friends and I would frequent. It is predominantly straight, but I never felt uneasy there. I didn't care to get on stage and sing Shania Twain, Man, I Felt Like a Woman. I would get off stage and someone would buy me a beer, and, we would toast to it. And it was
Come
fun,
on now.
Yeah, it was like our little cheers. And so I had just went through a breakup, and I am one of those people I love really, really hard. And so with abandonment issues that I have, when I go through a breakup, I'm shut down, I'm in bed for a week. And uh so some friends called me and was like, hey, it's Deanne's birthday, like let's go to Bull Feathers, let's sing, get out of the house, let's just have drinks, appetizers, and be together, and so I agreed. And just like any other time, I walked in there with my friends. We sang, we, had a couple drinks. I got up and went to the restroom, and surveillance shows that this man stopped me um, on the way to the restroom. And it looked like a pleasant conversation. We couldn't hear with the surveillance what the conversation was about, but it looked like a pleasant conversation. But then I gave him a business card and then went to the restroom, came back, walked past him, went to my friends, finished our cocktail, paid our tab, and we left. And then surveillance cameras showed that he left a few minutes later by himself. Um, from there, I don't really know what happened other than what has been told to me and what witnesses have said, but it appears as if he followed me home and knocked on my door. And when I opened the door, he is trained military. And so he said that he had me knocked out on first hit and spent several hours sexually assaulting me with his own body as well as with foreign objects, and beating me until he took my cell phone and called the mother of his children and confessed to murder. And from there, he stole my car.
I just want to pause with that for just a second.
Sure.
Hours. He spent hours abusing you.
Yes, it was
This wasn't minutes
estimated.
or hours.
Yeah, it was estimated to be 2 to 3 hours that he spent with my body. Yeah.
Okay, forgive me. I just had to sit with that for a minute because that in and of itself is horrific. I mean, minutes would be horrific, but hours?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So he, the mother of his child is begging him to just turn himself in, and He refuses to do so. So he steals my credit cards, my cash. I was a bartender at the time, so I always had cash on me, and went bar hopping. So while he's at the bar, he is bragging to other patrons of the F slur that he just killed, and he's covered in blood. So they call security, and security kicks him out. That's it. They just kick him out. So at this point, he's got a buzz, gets in my car drunk, and wrecks my car. Luckily, he just goes into a ditch, so he didn't hurt anybody else. But cops show up, and again, he's covered in blood, but it's not his blood, and he confesses to murder. So they arrest him, and they ask him why he did it, and he said it was because I sexually propositioned him.
Of course.
So, of course. So
Hold 1 second. So by then he's already confessed 3 times, right? So he calls his wife, he tells the bar patrons, and then he tells the cops.
Yep.
So it's pretty obvious to me, at least, that he wanted people to know. This wasn't like someone that was trying to run from what he did.
Yeah.
How does that feel? How does that feel to you?
It shows me that it just makes me ask myself, where have we failed as a society? And this is to not justify what this man has done by any means, and this does not give him a get out of jail free card, but especially here in the South, and when it comes to straight white men, we don't take care of our brains. We don't take care of our mental health. And this is how generational abuse starts until you get to a breaking point. If, it makes me wonder, is he a gay man and he saw me and I was everything that he hated about himself and that's why he did it? But we also know that sexually assaulting someone isn't always about attraction. It's about that power. And so maybe it is that, and that he isn't gay.
So that's oh, go ahead.
No, please. No, please go ahead.
So that's the intellectual side of things. Emotionally, when you hear that someone is practically bragging to 3 different folks to taking your life, how does that make you feel?
It hurts, and it's terrifying. This person knows what I look like taking my last breath. This person knows what I look like at my most vulnerable moment, and I have no recollection of it. I couldn't pick this man out of a crowd. But what really hurts me is when, yes, baby mom was saying, please turn yourself in. And I will say she was calling the police, she was reporting him, but he lived like an hour away, so and I'm sorry, I don't think she called the police. I think she called his family, and his family and brothers were trying to find him, I think is what happened. So, but where I get angry with all of this is when he tells the cops that I sexually propositioned him and that's why he did it, they say, well, it seems like 2 guys just fighting out in the yard and one of them lost. They got him a pack of cigarettes, let him smoke cigarettes. They took him through McDonald's drive-through. It took 18 hours for them to find my body. And I feel like as soon as the whole gay thing was put in it, then people didn't care as much. If it
I'm holding back because this isn't about me, but I'm certainly feeling a whole lot for you right now. I did want to pause and just say something. If I can find any silver lining in this moment, at least from what you discussed thus far, he knows what it's like for you to take your last breath and what he thinks is your death. he didn't anticipate that he would know what it was like to see you resurrect. And to me, there's such power in that
Very true.
because he didn't win. The dark didn't win. It's almost, I mean, not to compare you to Jesus, but it's very, just the fact
Please
that
don't do
he thought he,
that.
no. But I mean, we're all reborn through Jesus, so I can say that. I mean, at least I believe that. But the fact that the darkness celebrated a win or thought it did, and then for you to just rise right back up. I just have to pause and just feel that for a minute because that in and of itself is so beautiful. I don't think I can articulate what that makes me feel like because when you said that, that's immediately where I went with it.
Yeah.
Because you're not dead, obviously. So, all right. So
Wouldn't that be a
18
plot
hours.
twist?
I mean, I am a medium after all, but it's generally this good. Anyways, okay, so 18 hours before these homophobic cops, I'll call them that, decide to give a shit about you. So what happens then?
Well, actually, so I think what played in my favor is the detective that ended up investigating and found me was a Black man. And I think that 100% played in my favor. He is actually still to this day a part of my life. Um, he would sit with me and my family, after I got out of the hospital, and when he could be home with his wife and kids, and he would just sit with us and talk with us, and absolutely amazing. But I think that he
And
knows.
go ahead. I think you were going to go there because I was about to ask that. I think you're going there. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just think he knows how it feels to be a minority, especially in the South. And he had even shared some information with me that happened to his younger brother that was a hate crime related, but it was a racial hate crime versus sexual orientation.
And how
So
does it
so that
feel?
just definitely played in my favor.
Sure. How does it feel to be seen, for lack of a better word, to connect with someone in that regard, as a member of a marginalized community meets another member of a marginalized community, and one hate crime resembles another, and it sounds like you have, a partner in this moment, whereas everyone else just kind of left you. How does that feel?
Yeah. I mean, it was very eye-opening because I still lead as being a white man. So there are privileges that I have that I wasn't even aware of. And sometimes I'm still not aware of, which is not being aware of the privilege is part of my privilege,
Ding,
you
ding,
know.
ding.
And so it was just so eye-opening to me. And I kind of became a and I don't want to be careful how I say this, and I hope everyone knows my heart, but I kind of, fast forwarding, I kind of became an advocate and a speaker for people who maybe aren't able to speak or just isn't in a place to speak. And I've had men of color, women of color, gay, straight, all the things, all the people, all the kinds reach out to me, and I've been able to help give them a voice, and that has just been so empowering. And every day I'm humbled with it, and in so many conversations I still realize that even though I'm a gay man in the South, even though I was a victim of a hate crime, even though people wanted to find me and finish the job when the trial and everything was going on and hate and death threats were starting, I was still leading with being a white man. And the way that that alone played in my favor was great for me, but what about everybody else? And so I don't know. I could go
What
on
I,
and on and on and not even find the
what I
right
hear
words
you
to.
saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but what I hear you saying is you believe that if you were a person of color, like they wouldn't have fought hard to find who did this to you. They may have just written it off as, just a fight between two guys, as they tried to initially. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think that as soon as they were told that that I was a gay man, that I was then dumped into this bucket outside of being a white straight man. I think that I don't know if I would have been treated different if I was also of a different race. So it's hard for me to speak on that, but it was very eye-opening to me to see that the fact that I'm human didn't matter. What are my stats? And that is what matters.
Whew. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of pressure to have in that moment too. So let's, I don't want to spend too much more time on that night itself, but I do want to just kind of paint the overall picture. Physically, not what happened, but where were you when you got to the hospital? What injuries did you have? What were you looking like physically?
So I could not open my eyes. I could hear. And so even and with the brain trauma, uh, when my mother and grandmother showed up to the hospital, I thought they were nurses. I didn't realize who they were. Um, there was a lot of memory loss. I was able to luckily get that back, but I have scars. I have permanent nerve damage. So like my equilibrium's always off. Like I can't like close my eyes and hold my head back in the shower or I fall. So there are things that continue. Like I'm now the person that I don't need to watch the weather forecast. I can tell you what type of day it's going to be based on how tight my muscles are. Like it's
I
raining
get that.
today and it's raining today and I'm stiff, you know. But the point that I always like to make with that is I was able to recover from that. I was able to recover from those scars, but what he did to me mentally, that's a scar. I mean, that I don't even know if it's ever scarred over. Like it's still at times an open wound, you know, the mental health of it all.
Now, sorry, I'm for the audience, I'm taking a little pause because I'm processing it all. It's heavy stuff, so I can only imagine how you, David, must be feeling. Now, memories, you say your memory came back, but did your memories of that night come back?
No, no, I don't remember anything about that night. Sometimes I'll have like flashes or thoughts of something, but I don't know if it's something that was put there that someone else has told me. I don't have anything to base on because, you know, we did go to court. We were in court with him. We heard his confessions. We heard all these things, but we were only hearing what he is telling us is his truth, which at this point, there's no credibility to you now. What are you saying to fluff things or hide things, you know? So I will say that he did end up stating that I never did sexually proposition him, that I looked like an easy target, that I looked like somebody that had a lot of money and wasn't threatening. And so
Was there a motive?
I guess just that he wanted money is what he says. Apparently he and baby mama were having an issue because he just got discharged from the military for marijuana. And so she had kicked him out. She was pissed at him. And I guess he wanted money. Because I mean, that's what he kept saying is I just look like and he did get some money from me. I was a bartender, I always had cash on me, but he got a couple credit cards but I mean nothing life-changing in a positive way for him.
What was his conviction?
Now you want me to be pissed off, right? So he gets sentenced. He is not a registered sex offender. Um, he was sentenced to either 10 or 12 years in prison. Before he made it to prison, he was still in county jail for 4 months, and he was released on good behavior. He did 4 months of his time. He did violate his probation one time since he's been out, and he went back for like a year. But he's back out.
Four
And he's,
months.
pardon?
4 months?
Yeah, for good time. Before I was ever even able to walk without a walker. And so when they called to tell me that he was being released, for good time. I was like, but I haven't had good time.
Okay, so I just want to paint a picture in case the audience is not caught up. Um, so a man that beat you and essayed you for hours, hours. Was this in your home?
Yes, yeah, he had followed me to my apartment.
In your own apartment. He essayed you and beat you for hours on end over money, we're guessing. Um, he bragged about it to three different parties, and you can't walk, you can't see, you don't recognize your mom or your grandmother, and he gets 4 months in jail. Not prison, but jail.
Right.
Give me one feeling word. What does that feel like?
I'm so angry with that. You know, when I needed this to be taken seriously. And people ask me all the time, like, why are you still in Tennessee? Why don't you leave? But if I leave, then no one then I can't be a part of the change. And I have to be a part of the change because there's so many other little Davids out there, you know. Um it it makes me so I don't know. I don't even know what I don't feel like there's a word big enough to put to it, you
Get that?
know? And he got I mean, what is that? A slap on the wrist? And what they want to tell me is, well, he attempted to murder you, but he didn't. Because he failed at what he tried to do, because he sucked at what he tried to do, doesn't mean that was not his intent. You know, just because I was stronger than him doesn't mean that he should get less time because I survived. Because what about the part of me that he did kill?
You
Because
know
I
what
became
this is
this,
too? I mean, that is anger provoking. Don't let me trivialize that in any way. That pisses me off, obviously.
yeah,
But he could have, I mean, if he would have just shot you, he probably would have gotten off completely. Because he could have just, used that language, oh, I feared for my life, and then nothing. Because it is the South and Tennessee. But this is giving me shades of Brandon Tina's murder. The topic of she was the subject in Boys Don't Cry, for those that don't know. She was a trans man who was essayed and shot, and the cops basically blamed it on him. I'm sorry, forgive me, blamed it on him. Um, yeah, it's giving me shades of that and shades of Matthew Shepard. I mean, I can't imagine if you had passed what would have been the outcome. If
I
you
know.
had absolutely no voice, what do
I
you
think
think
about
would have
Matthew
happened?
Shepard a lot because there's so many things that are mirror image. It took, I think they said I think it was 18 hours to find his body, and it was 18 hours to find mine. And then of course these guys wanted to say they
Pause for just 1 second because um, for the audience, I am a medium and I get signs throughout this whole thing. You said earlier that he gotten 10 or 12 years, or he was going to get 10 or 12 years. 10, 12 happens to be my birthday. That's also the day Matthew Shepard died.
oh wow.
Do,
God.
do, 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 do. Yeah, I get moments like that all the time.
Oh
But
wow. Whew.
when you brought up that, I'm just like, ooh, ooh, ooh. So yeah, numbers is my thing. Sorry, audience, I do get a little hokey sometimes, but it is what it
No,
is. Uh,
I get so intrigued with that stuff, so I'm glad that you told me.
yeah, it's something I immediately, because when you said 10, 12, I'm like, oh, that's my birthday. And then we brought up Matthew, and I'm like, whoa. Because with Matthew, that's a case that's been close to my heart since it happened, because again, he died on my birthday. But along with Tatiana Jefferson, which is a whole nother case. They both died the same day, which is my birthday. But Matthew, I'm not going to cry, was tied to a fence and covered in blood. His face was covered in blood. I'll never forget this. And the only parts of his face that weren't covered in blood were his tear stains.
Hmm.
That
That part rips me apart every time. I mean,
mm,
a jogger thought he would, because it was October. A jogger thought he was just a scarecrow out in the field and realized that, like that.
I'm getting another little sign here. Forgive me. So in Matthew's trial, and we will go back to you. But for Matthew's trial, I'll never forget this either. Romaine Jefferson, I believe is her name. I could be wrong. Romaine Patterson, was getting tired of the Reverend Phelps Church, because this is when the Westboro Baptist Church started, was at Matthew's trial, not Matthew's trial, his killer's trial. They started screaming at his mom on the way in, God hates F words and Matthews burns, and so Romaine decided, and I'm sure you know this, but she went and got like projects from like Michael's, and she made angel wings to cover the protesters, so Matthew's mom could go in, and I just angel wings, just sitting over here. I got that one and a treatment. Anyways, it's an angel card of all things to have right there.
Right.
Just okay. Matthew, rest in power, not forgotten. I think both of us carry your legacy on in some way, without even trying, I guess, or unintentionally, subconsciously. Now, okay, let's see. I think you've answered a lot of my questions without me even going there. How long did it take you to feel somewhat safe going back into the world? Did you hide out at home for a while? I imagine I would.
Well, I had to
What was
because the death threats got so bad of people wanting to finish the job because the media released that gay man goes to straight bar, brings straight man home for sex, and gets beat up. So when they found out that straight man was going to jail or is in jail and looking at prison time, they started saying that I was the one that should be in prison. They should find me and finish the job. They started saying, oh, well, I know David Keck, and he was probably in his car doing drugs with this guy, but I don't do drugs. The drug testing came back negative, and so that wasn't true.
as
But
if addicts deserve to die?
right. And I mean, and that's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, I have been hit on by women, and not one time have I thought, I need to kill you. I let her know I'm not interested. And then if I get uncomfortable, I politely excuse myself. You know, I don't know, but
It's up there. It's up there with the Twinkie defense for me, which comes from
uh-huh.
um, Harvey Milk's killer's trial, Dan White's trial, where he blamed sweets on the reason he killed Harvey Milk because he ate too many Twinkies. But this gay panic defense that's what it's called colloquially.
And it's a real thing.
It's a real thing, and the fact that it came up in your I'm going to call him your killer because he thought he killed you.
Yeah.
Came up in the trial. It's just, I mean, it's the oldest trick, and I'm putting that in air quotes for those that can't see me. It's the oldest like trick in the book to get away with hurting a gay man.
Yeah.
I don't, or a trans person. Um, it's like the oldest. I mean, yeah, it makes me sick. It really makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
Truly.
Same. But to answer your question, it probably took about a good year. I couldn't climb stairs. I couldn't really walk. So I couldn't go back to my apartment. So I had to stay. I moved in with my grandmother because she had a bedroom on the bottom floor that I could access easily. And so I mean, everything, I couldn't drive my car. When I was able to start driving again, I didn't have a car because it had been wrecked. Like, and then when I did get home, it was scary. The crime scene wasn't cleaned up. We were under the impression that the crime scene would be cleaned up by professionals, and I did not know that. And so when I came back home, I walked in, and it was still a horror film, and so
How does it feel having physically survived all of this? I mean, obviously you're still healing at this point, but you're not in the hospital anymore. How does it feel going home to your place where you're supposed to feel safe. This is supposed to be your sanctuary away from the world. How does it feel to walk in there and see your blood everywhere and knowing that it's your blood?
A part of me died that day. A big part of me. I became somebody that I didn't know. My family had to get to know this new David. My friends had to get to know this new David. It completely changed everything. And I had known that, even before going back to my apartment, but going in and seeing that was the last bit of that David, and then I had to clean that up, and it was just I had to go through a mourning process for that David. I liked him, you know, and so it hurt. It breaks me.
What I'm hearing is grief, and I don't know what a good feeling word for broken is, but I know what you're saying, or as much as I'm able to, because obviously it didn't happen to me. So I don't know exactly how you feel, but I'm doing my best to empathize with pieces of it. Um, can I just say you're a strong ass bitch? I'm just saying.
Yes, you can say
That's a term of endearment. Because wow, to survive, I don't know what I would feel like coming home and just processing all of this all at once and then seeing the visual of
Well, and it's kind of
that.
what helped make it real, because of course I had the physical repercussions of everything, but going into my apartment and seeing the actual crime scene, it showed me how bad this really was.
Do you think you needed to see it?
I'm glad that I did. I wish it was in a different way. Um, for instance, the part that I struggle with the most is I was scrubbing the floors and trying to get things cleaned up, and I just wore myself out. And within no time, I wore myself out, right? Because of the elements I have now. So I go to my bedroom to lay down and go to bed, and I pull the blankets down, and they're covered in blood. I didn't know that he had moved my body to all these different rooms, depending on what kind of action he was taking against my body. And I pretty much had no choice but to lay in the aftermath of my assault.
Audience, I know dead air is horrible on a podcast, but I'm just sitting with this. Because I mean, I've heard your story before. Mark Hoover had you on Catch My Killer, and I heard it then. I love Mark. Thank you, Mark, for all the stuff you've done for my family. I would not be the influencer I am on TikTok without Mark.
He's great.
Having said that, I mean, I've heard your story before, but I don't know that I've ever taken it in as much as I am right now. Granted, I was using then, so I was kind of numb in so many ways, or as numb as I could be. So just hearing it, it's heartbreaking. I mean, that goes without saying, but it's even like tears at your soul to think that there's someone walking around that could be that evil. Because I don't know a better word to describe that. Like I don't evil, like it's pure evil to me. Um, Now, how this might be an insensitive question, and I hope it doesn't come out that way, but how long did it take you to kind of fall into the new normal version of you? You know, normal in quotes, obviously, but this new version of David, how long did it take? Or are you comfortable in, this new David yet? Is that still something you're working on?
It is something that is still in the works, but it's getting better every day. I probably a year and a half ago at this point, I was a guest on a podcast, and they do these rapid fire questions. And one of the questions was, would you change what happened to you if you could? And immediately I said no. And I was like, like clutch the pearls. Like I did not know I was going to say that. Luckily, it was like the last part of the podcast that I was being a guest on. So I was able to like in the show after there, and like I went outside, took a walk with the dogs, got some fresh air. But I was thinking, I was like, you know what? No, like I wouldn't change it because of everything that I'm doing. You know, I know so many gay people that would have laid there where it happened and probably would not have survived because they don't have the family that I have and the friends that I have to lift them. And so if I'm able to take what happened and turn it into something beautiful and change things and be a part of that, then it's not in vain. And so about a year and a half ago is when that happened, and having that realization really changed things for me. But it's still, I mean, I'm still a work in progress, you know.
Sorry, I'm processing now. I don't know that I shared this with you, but I think the audience knows I'm in recovery. That's no secret. But the past year has been horrific for me. And obviously it pales in comparison. And I hope it doesn't come out like I'm trying to compare my story to yours. Metaphorically, though, I feel like I was the bloody body laying in Albuquerque that didn't have the friends or the family to come save. And I think subconsciously, or maybe even consciously, um, knowing that you got up from that um, definitely planted some seeds in me and had me fighting. Because it took a lot for me to get out of Albuquerque and come to California. Like it took all the strength I had, which wasn't much. Um, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your story. Um, it feels weird to say thank you for surviving, but thank you for surviving.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
you're
I mean,
welcome.
it just sounds weird. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone say it, but
I love that though. Like it
not.
brought a smile to my face. Like it's just that comment alone is validation, you know, that if I survived that car accident, if I survived this attempted murder, I'm here for a reason. And damn it, I'm going to find that reason. And, you know, the path that I'm on now is a path that I would not have been on had this not happened to me. And I'm the kind of person that the world has to sometimes really just, for lack of better words, punch me in the face for me to get onto a different route. And and I think that that's what happened. And I do want to say to you that I follow you. You know, we've been friends for a long time now, and I follow you, and your vulnerability and the things that you're sharing is amazing. When you called me and said that, you know, you're starting this show and wanted me to be a part of it, immediately I was like, okay, yes, like I even showered today and I had no reason to other than this. So like I'm not leaving my house, and I even like put gel in my hair. But
Come on,
what
Jill.
I just want to try to laugh for a second. But what I want to say, what I hear so many times is people want to say, I'm not trying to compare. And we cannot compare traumas. The worst thing that I went through is the worst thing that I went through. There is no greater than or less than. What you have went through is the hardest thing you have went through. I don't think it's comparing. I think it's trying to, it was your way of letting me know that I've had hardships, and and I
Oh,
appreciate that. So
I'm so grateful you said that because honestly, I got to call myself out because I really don't like when people say that either.
yeah,
Because in my spirit, but it does offend people sometimes, but I don't mean it offensively. But I do wholeheartedly believe that all pain is the same. Now it's horrific, but our brain doesn't know the difference. Like it doesn't, and your trauma is your trauma, and my trauma is my trauma,
right.
but they're both still painful. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for reminding me of one of my core values that I've kind of let go by the wayside because it does sometimes. I don't think people understand my intention behind it.
Right.
But thank you for reminding me
It
of that.
truly is one of those just lack of better words kind of thing, right? Like you're trying to be empathetic and sympathetic and not trying to make it about you, but still trying to relate. And I have just had to, even trying to have people on my show and they'll listen to, my story and they'll say, no, I can't because my trauma is nothing like yours. And that's not what my show's about. That's not what trauma's about. Like my path is mine. And the hardest thing I went through is mine. That,
Amen.
and I really want to get that point across to everybody because you cannot, the moment that you start telling yourself that this isn't really trauma, someone else has went through something worse, then you're not going to nurture it and take care of it and heal it, which becomes that generational abuse, which leads to drugs and alcohol and destructive things where you're just trying to numb that pain. And don't belittle your trauma.
I'm so grateful you said that, because you're absolutely right. It invalidates our own feelings when we do that. And when we don't validate our feelings and when we don't feel our feelings, um, we use something to take away that feeling, whether it's drugs, sex, people, gambling, whatever. It can be whatever. It can be an action of some sort to just ignore the feeling. The feeling goes on. I learned this in treatment recently, even though I knew it, but it's just a better way of saying it. It goes on the shit pile. And the shit pile doesn't go away. The shit pile just keeps piling up. And trauma will always make itself known. So even if you try to invalidate it, it will always make itself known. That's something I know for sure, if I can be Oprah for a second, is that trauma will always make itself known. So one can try and compare their trauma to others, but all that does is invalidate the feelings behind the trauma. The trauma will always make itself known. I got like rub that in. But you're
If there's
absolutely right.
one thing, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, go.
Oh, I was just going to say, if there's one thing in this world that does not discriminate, that holds no prejudices, that doesn't matter sex, race, age, it's trauma. So, there's no getting away from it unless you deal with that.
I almost want to do a part two because I didn't realize the hour was going to go so fast. We've got like 10 minutes.
It happens with us every time we talk, man.
It really does because I could talk about, especially, I mean, I love you and I could talk to you all day, but I hate to say I love the topic of trauma, but I'm fascinated by the topic because I really, especially fascinated by generational trauma. And, to go off on a little rabbit hole real quick, like the fact that grandchildren of soldiers in the Vietnam War have nightmares of the Vietnam War and they were never there, shows me there's a whole lot more going on about trauma that we really haven't gotten like to know yet. Like there's so much more to trauma than just what we experience in this life. And for some of us, that can be truly horrific. And just to go back to comparing trauma, like I can't compare my trauma, but I can definitely empathize. Like I don't know what it's like to have someone try and kill me in my bathroom or in my apartment, but I do know what it's like to be beaten. I do know what it's like to be called slurs. I do know what it's like to be humiliated and have someone try and just knock me down. I do know what it's like to get death threats. I get them all the time. I do know what I mean. I can definitely empathize with the feelings throughout your story. And audience, if you're listening, it's not always about going through the same exact thing. More so, it is about connecting to the feelings that were going on. You may not know what it's like to be neglected by your mother, but if you know what it's like to be neglected by your partner, the neglect is the feeling. So we have similar feelings we can connect with. Now, as we're wrapping up, how and why did you start your podcast?
So,
and what's it called, by the way?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Surviving Podcast. It was called Surviving Abuse, but as my show grew, I ended up dropping the abuse just because I just wanted something different. It was painting me into a corner, but you can find me either way, but it's called Surviving Abuse. I started it, I guess we're into our second year. It's doing really well. Maybe third year. I don't know, but COVID happened. When COVID happened, the world shut down, and so did therapy. And I didn't realize how much I needed therapy. And even doing like it via Zoom wasn't the same. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to spend some money. I'll buy the equipment. I will start a show. I'll do 2 episodes. My mom will give it a heart on social media. I'll get bored with it and throw it in the closet. And I was wrong. It's doing really well, and people are talking, and cool things are happening. So every week we discuss. I have a new guest on, and we discuss different forms of trauma, but it is not depressing. I make a sandwich. I start with happy stuff. In the middle, we talk about some crazy shit. But in the end, we end on happy stuff because I want people to find unlimited amounts of resources and motivation. After every interview, I get this burst of energy to get up and go clean something or go do something, you know. And that's the point of my show. And I would love for everybody to check it out. I'm on all the platforms, I'm on all the social medias. You can look for David Keck or Surviving Podcast. But yeah, I
will
love
also
it. It's
link
my
to
baby.
it. Oh, come on, baby. I will also link to it on my website when I finish my website. This is a totally new podcast for me. I had Disinfecting Sunlight and I did it for years. But new me, new podcast. I'm not the same person I was when I was making that show. And also it started as recovery and became more about social justice. So I know what it's like to be kind of pigeonholed. I want this show more to be about survivors, storytellers, and justice seekers. So you're a storyteller and a survivor and a justice seeker as well. So there you go, all three. Now, okay, let's see. I don't want to end it just yet. Do you ever get emotionally triggered? Well, this sounds like an obvious question now that I'm asking it. I imagine you get emotionally triggered hearing some stories and maybe connecting with traumas of your own. How do you deal with that when you're hearing it?
So yes, people do ask me that often because I'm talking about trauma. People will ask me questions about mine, but I've just learned when I start feeling anxious, I've truly learned how to breathe. I know it sounds so silly, but for years, up until probably like 3, 4, 5 months ago, I don't know how I have not passed away by not breathing. Like I was doing it all wrong. But I've just learned like these steps. I've learned these things. I give myself a motivational talk before I log on. I have a song that I listen to before I log on that makes me feel good. And where I have told my story so many times, it is a part of me regaining that control, and that empowers me, and it's another fu to him because I'm not hiding behind it. And so he didn't win. Every time I tell my story, every time someone recognizes me because of my story, I won, not him. So it's a way for me to regain that control. That is what worked for me. Might not work for you, but I want my life back. I want my control back. I want to be the driver of my car, and telling my story is what does that. So I don't get as triggered as one may think.
Are there any stories, any guests that have just sat with you, that maybe haunt you? I don't like that word so much, but I can't think of a better one right now.
Yes, there's one that I had on recently. He's the author of a book called When Dating Hurts, and his daughter was murdered by her boyfriend. And the book is amazing. He's amazing. I did some TikToks about it, but that one always sticks with me. And I don't know why. And I think that maybe it's because seeing the parent being the advocate, I feel like that's what my mom and dad would be doing. And so seeing his reaction, the way that he's handling things, reminds me of what I'm so grateful that my parents aren't having to do.
Whew. I know what you mean by that. I definitely know what you mean because I work with a lot of grieving moms.
Yeah.
And when I'm really struggling emotionally and when I really feel like I can't go on, that's who I think of. That's who I go to. because I will always say there's no one more powerful than a grieving mom or a grieving dad in this instance, because they've literally lost a piece of themselves and they're still able to push forward and advocate that. Now, where do you want this podcast to go in a few years? I mean, it's already blown up more than you could have anticipated. So what do you see it doing?
So when I shoot for the moon, I aim high. So a part of me is just throwing this out in the universe, okay? But I will be on Netflix. It will happen one way or another. I will be doing some big public speakings. I want to be seen, I want to be heard. And not just for myself, but because there's so many people that just don't have the courage yet, or wasn't even given the opportunity to have the courage, and I'm gonna do it. Damn it.
I love you so much. I love you so much, and we're so much alike in so many ways. Even when, like, I mean, we don't talk that often, but when we do talk, I'm just like, yeah, check, 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 connect with that, check, check, because we're so much alike. And I love that you brought up Netflix. Okay, I'm gonna go off on a little tangent here, but we're so much alike because I told everybody when I left New Mexico, I was one day sober from IV meth use. I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But I left New Mexico, and the moment I got to LA, I said, I'm going to make friends with people in the media industry. I'm going to get little AJ's story out there. We're going to make a freaking documentary. I'm going to make a movie. Now, documentary movie hasn't happened yet. but right before I left New Mexico, just maybe a month or two, I had a dream. And I was on stage with Oprah Winfrey, the one and only Oprah. And we were presenting a show in front of Netflix called We Are AJ. And I could look in the front row. Always makes me cry. I could look in the front row and I could see all the families that I've been working with, because we're presenting a show for not just AJ, but for all of them. And it's going to be like a docu-series, criminal justice kind of show. And so I just kind of forgot about that. Now, I imagined in my head, at least, that Netflix was in Hollywood. I was in New Mexico with Hollywood was not on my map, or it wasn't an option. The next week, I literally get a phone call saying, hey, do you want to come live in Los Angeles with me? Out of the blue. Okay, yeah, sure. Why not? Who would turn that down? Because it was free rent for a few months too. Like, okay. So I came out here, but I promised myself that I wouldn't move in. This was not like a requirement to live here, but this is what I put on myself. I wasn't going to just move in with someone unless I went through an inpatient treatment program, because I didn't want to put them like smack dab in the middle of my addiction. Like, it wasn't fair. So I went and I signed up for treatment in Hollywood. Total fluke. But I get there and I go out of the little house at night and I go walk out because I wanted to see the Hollywood sign because it's right there. And what do I see? Every single freaking night, Netflix. It's literally right in front of my treatment center. Big, bold, red letters. So every night I would walk out there and I would just say, I'm going to be there one day with Oprah. Now, I haven't met Oprah yet, but I will say this. When I met my sponsor, because I do work a 12-step program, when I met my sponsor, I told him this little story. And he says, oh, I know her. And not like I know of her, but it's like, I know her. So I can't say his name, obviously, it's anonymous. But also this week I had another one of those. I call them little God breadcrumbs, just to let me know I'm walking in the right direction. I'll share this with you and I'll get back to you. But I met a friend in treatment. I won't say his name, but I met a friend in treatment and I freaking love him. We've become friends. And he's like, hey, can you house sit? Me and my dad are going to be out of town. I said, sure, no worries. I walk into his freaking house and there's a freaking Emmy sitting right there. Can't say his name, but there's a freaking Emmy there. So I'm just like, rub off on me. So it's only a matter of time. So I love that you dream big because I do the same thing. That's what I was trying to get at here, this long tangent. Because I think we're both big dreamers, but I know that our dreams are coming true. Now, we have very different paths, but I see your dreams coming true and I know mine are coming true. I just can't say all of them yet, because there's a lot happening on this end of mine and this end of the world. Now, let's see. what do you want your legacy to be? If you were to, I don't want you to die tomorrow, but if you did, like, what would you want to be known as?
I want to be known as a survivor. I want to be the true definition of what that is. I want to be known for allowing myself to visit those dark places because they're there for a reason, but not unpacking my suitcase and living there. I want to be known for kicking all of this bad in the ass.
Mm.
I want to get my revenge, but in a different way. And that's what I want it. That's what I want my legacy to be. I want people to say, God, he went through this and accomplished this, and because of this guy, I accepted this or learned this, and that's it. It sounds so corny to say it, but it's my truth.
That's not according to me. I get it. Now, this is kind of a left field question, but I ask it in every interview because it's my favorite question that I stole from Oprah. So I give her full credit, but I love the question. What's the lesson it's taken you the longest to learn?
That I'm not invincible.
Hmm. But I kind of feel like you are. If I'm being honest, I kind of feel like you are.
Like I had, after going through that car accident and recovering from that, I had this, and granted, I was also, of course, young in the car accident, but when you have your teenage years and your early 20s, you kind of have this invincible mentality. And it took me a little while to realize that not just one bad event happens in someone's life. Like I feel like I looked at things and was like, okay, I don't have to be aware of my surroundings. I don't have to be guarded. I don't have to be easy on the gas pedal because I've already had the one bad thing. So I'm now going to live to be 110 years old and die in my sleep, full sound mind. And um, that's definitely not how the world works.
I
So,
gotta get that in my soul. Because going dark for just a second. My brother was murdered when I was 3. He was 19. So in my head, I'm just like, that can't happen again.
yeah.
And then AJ, my nephew, murdered at the exact same age in very eerily similar circumstances. So I get that because I kind of grew up with this kind of subconscious belief that, surely, one murder is more than enough. Like, Lord, please no more. Anyways, now I always end because I don't like my guests to feel like they're all alone in their stories, even though I've kind of talked about my story a little bit here. But turning the tables real quick, is there anything you want to ask me?
Yes, I do. I will preface with saying kind of what I've already said before is, you and I become friends and we don't talk every day, but we don't have to. That's not the kind of friends that we have to be. If I call, you answer, vice versa. I've watched you at a really, really high, and I've seen you at a really, really low, and you look better than I've ever seen you. Your voice sounds good, that you have that light in your eye again. Um, and I've missed it. I didn't realize how much I had missed it because you do inspire me. You lift me, and so my question to you is, where do you get your inner strength? Because I tell you what, I would never want to arm wrestle you with that inner strength, buddy.
Um, that would be a challenge of an arm wrestle. I'm just saying. Okay, from your stuff, mister. Where do
Is
I
that a
get my
TikTok live?
bring it? But that's a really good question. I've never been asked that question. Where do I get my inner strength? This is going to sound really hokey, but you asked it. But because I always go down my little spiritual rabbit hole, because I know in my soul that everything I've gone through has prepared me for something very big. Um, it feels like something in the media because I always told myself I would end up in Hollywood. And because God's got jokes, I ended up in Hollywood in rehab. but um, but that was 20 years later. But like I always, my inner strength comes from my power to manifest things for me, to speak things into existence. And I know this will sound however it sounds, but I know it's my challenge to break the generational curses of my family because I'm the first to graduate high school. I'm the first to get a college degree. I'm the first to move out of Texas. I'm the first to be in recovery. Sorry, audience. Also, there's that. There's the knowing that I'm supposed to be going through all this, even the hurt. Like I know I was watching The Color Purple yesterday, which is one of my favorites. But watching the new movie musical, which I'm obsessed with already, like Celie had to go through all that. And the new version, spoiler alert, it's not so whitewashed as the original. So we see full on DV, we see, essay. It's heavy. But like you, she got broken down and Mr. thought he won. And then baby, the moment she rises up, the moment she sees that little spark of hope, she's just back and like the whole world changes. Such a powerful film and lesson. Getting back to your question. So I got that level of inner strength. And then there's always the knowledge that AJ literally died facing an AA meeting. He struggled with substance. He struggled with substance abuse. I didn't know this at the time. Not that I could have saved him, because you can't save an addict. We fight the same disease. And he never got to walk into the rooms of a 12-step, even though he died. He died outside of one. So, with that knowledge, I know that no matter how many times I fall down, I gotta get up for him. If there's any air in my lungs, and I used to tell my sponsees this because I used to be a sponsor back in the day, that if you've got air in your lungs, you still have hope. So I have to remember, no matter what I'm going through, and no matter if I fall down, AJ would give anything to get back up. I got to get back up for him. And audience, I think it's flipped, but it says I am AJ, not Jamal. I don't know. It's I am AJ. But those that are hearing me, I'm just pointing to my shirt, which says I am AJ. So thank you for asking that question, for making me cry.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was not scripted, but I think it was very powerful, and I hope that the tears were cleansing, and I want us to log off both feeling good, because what I tell people on my show all the time is this is also my therapy.
I'm literally supposed to be in therapy right now. I totally forgot that I had a 1:00 appointment. So I had to text him. Forgive me if you heard me typing a little bit, but I had to text him and let him know that I wasn't going to make it because I totally forgot.
I didn't even notice.
Don't ever do drugs, kids, because it messes with your short-term memory. I'm still healing. David, this has been not just a pleasure, but an honor to hear your story. I truly believe, like Brene Brown says, we share our stories with those who've earned the right to hear them. So thank you for entrusting your story to me. And I don't hold that. I hold that in very high regard. So absolutely. I love you so much. This won't be posted for a while, but I'm grateful I got this in the can. I'm not going to fuck up this podcast like I did the last one. So, sorry, audience. I do cuss, and I'm from Texas. We cuss and pray at the same time. But I love you so much. Thank you so much. I will let you know when this drops, and I will stay in touch. Please stay in touch.
I hope y'all enjoyed that episode. Please subscribe to the Surviving Podcast wherever you get your podcast. Hopefully you got a lot of inspiration and hope out of that. David is one of the strongest men I've ever come across. You can support him by looking at the description of this episode and just subscribing to the Surviving Podcast. Share his show, share my show. Help boost our stories, help boost our episodes. And yeah, I guess that's it. Until next time, y'all, stay in the lane.